This week isn't just big, it's game-changing. General Hospital.
The rain began as a whisper against the windows of the penthouse, soft and uncertain, like the calm before a storm no one wanted to name. Marco stood in the center of the room, his hands trembling at his sides, his breath shallow. Across from him, Sidwell remained still, almost statuesque, as if carved from something colder than stone. The silence between them stretched painfully, thick with years of unspoken expectations and a love that had long since curdled into disappointment. "Say something," Marco finally muttered, his voice cracking. "You called me here. You said this couldn't wait." Sidwell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the bar, pouring himself a drink with meticulous care. Ice clinked softly in the glass, an ordinary sound that somehow felt unbearably loud. "I did call you here for a reason," Sidwell said at last, his tone measured, almost emotionless. Marco swallowed hard. "Then just say it." Sidwell turned, his eyes sharp, cutting straight through him. "You've become a liability." The words hit like a physical blow. A liability?" Marco echoed, disbelief flooding his voice. "That's what I am to you now." "You've made reckless choices," Sidwell continued, ignoring the question. "Choices that have jeopardized everything I've built, everything I tried to give you." Marco shook his head, stepping forward. "I was trying to fix things. You don't understand what I've been dealing with." "I understand perfectly," Sidwell snapped, his voice rising just enough to silence him. "You think intention matters more than outcome. It doesn't. Not in this world." Marco's chest tightened. "So what? You're just going to throw me away? After everything?" Sidwell's gaze didn't waver. "I already have." The room seemed to tilt. For a moment, Marco thought he hadn't heard correctly. Surely this was another one of Sidwell's tests, another cruel lesson disguised as discipline. But the look in his father's eyes held no trace of ambiguity. "You're disowning me?" Marco whispered. "Yes." Just one word. No hesitation. No regret. Marco let out a hollow laugh, though his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You can't be serious. You're my father." "And you were my son," Sidwell replied coldly, "until you proved you couldn't be trusted with the legacy I intended for you." Something inside Marco broke. "Legacy," he shouted. "Is that all I've ever been to you? Some extension of your empire? Some pawn in your game?" "You were meant to be more," Sidwell said, his voice quiet now, but no less cruel. "But you failed." Marco staggered back, as if struck again. "I didn't fail. I made mistakes. There's a difference. Not when the consequences are this severe." The rain outside intensified, pounding against the glass as if echoing Marco's racing heart. "You're making a mistake," Marco said, his voice dropping to a desperate plea. "Whatever you think I've done, I can fix it. Just give me a chance." "No." The finality of it was suffocating. "I've already taken the necessary steps," Sidwell continued. "Your access to all accounts has been revoked. Your name has been removed from any legal holdings. As of now, you have nothing that ties you to me." Marco's stomach dropped. "You what?" he breathed. "It's done." The weight of those words settled over him like a crushing force. "You're leaving me with nothing," Marco said, his voice barely audible. "I'm leaving you with the consequences of your actions." Marco stared at him, searching desperately for any sign of compassion, any flicker of the father he once believed in. But there was nothing, just cold, unyielding resolve. Then I guess I never really mattered to you at all, Marco said, his voice breaking. Sidwell didn't respond. And that silence said everything. Marco stumbled out of the penthouse into the storm, the rain soaking him instantly. He didn't care. He barely felt it. Everything he had known, everything he had relied on was gone. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling hands, only to see notification after notification. Account access denied. Transaction failed. Security alert. Credentials revoked. It was real. Sidwell hadn't just disowned him. He had erased him. Unbelievable, Marco muttered, his voice hollow. He tried calling someone, anyone, but each number he dialed felt like a reminder of how isolated he truly was. The people who once surrounded him weren't friends. They were connections. And without Sidwell's power, those connections meant nothing. The realization hit harder than anything else. He was alone. Hours later, Marco found himself sitting in a dimly lit bar on the edge of town. The kind of place he would have never stepped foot in before. Now it was all he had. He nursed a cheap drink, staring blankly at the scratched surface of the counter. His reflection in the mirror behind the bar barely looked like him anymore, his usually polished appearance replaced by something raw, something broken. Rough night. The voice pulled him from his thoughts. A woman sat a few stools away, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. You could say that, Marco replied dryly. She tilted her head. You look like someone just ripped your world out from under you. Marco let out a bitter laugh. That obvious? Only to someone who's been there. He glanced at her, surprised. Yeah. She nodded. Yeah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marco sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. My father disowned me, he admitted, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. Her expression softened. That's not something you hear every day. No, Marco said quietly. It's not. And now? He stared into his glass. Now I have nothing. She studied him for a moment before speaking again. That's not entirely true. Marco frowned. Feels pretty true. You're still here, aren't you? He hesitated. Sometimes, she continued, losing everything is the only way to figure out who you really are. Marco scoffed. Sounds like something people say to make themselves feel better. Maybe, she admitted with a small smile. But it doesn't make it any less true. He didn't respond, but her words lingered. Days turned into weeks. Marco's life became a series of struggles he had never imagined facing. Finding a place to stay, scraping together money, navigating a world that no longer bent to his last name. Every door that once opened effortlessly now slammed shut in his face. And yet something began to change. At first it was small. A job at a mechanic shop, dirty, exhausting work that left his hands calloused and his body aching. The kind of work Sidwell would have considered beneath him. Marco hated it, until he didn't. Because for the first time in his life, everything he earned on his own. No influence, no shortcuts, just him. And slowly, painfully, he started to rebuild. But Sidwell wasn't done. One evening, as Marco locked up the shop, he noticed a sleek black car parked across the street. His chest tightened. He knew that car. The window rolled down, revealing Sidwell's familiar, unreadable expression. Get in, he said. Marco hesitated. Part of him wanted to walk away, to prove that he didn't need anything from the man who had destroyed his life. But another part, the part that still craved answers, pulled him forward. He opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Sidwell said, "You've changed." Marco let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Funny what losing everything will do to a person. Sidwell studied him. "I didn't expect you to last this long." Marco's jaw tightened. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's an observation." Silence fell again. Finally, Marco turned to him. "Why are you here?" Sidwell's gaze shifted forward. "Because the consequences of your actions didn't end with you." Marco's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "There are people looking for you," Sidwell said. "Dangerous people. And without my protection." The implication hung in the air. Marco's pulse quickened. "So, what, you came to warn me? Or to finish what you started?" Sidwell's expression didn't change. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to prove you're not the failure I believed you to be." Marco stared at him, anger and disbelief colliding. "You ruined my life," he said, his voice low and shaking. "And now you want me to prove something to you?" "I want you to survive," Sidwell replied. Marco's breath caught. "Because if you don't," Sidwell added, "then everything I did was for nothing." For the first time, there was something in his voice, something almost human. Regret? Doubt? Marco couldn't be sure. But it was enough to make him hesitate. "Why should I trust you?" he asked. Sidwell met his gaze. "You shouldn't."